SHAHMIE, AIDA, ALIYA, WARDAH.
Assalamualaikum. So I'm NURUL BINTI NAZERI. So I'll begin my presentation with the first introduction. So Sunnah. Sunnah, also spelled Sunnah in Arabic. It is the Islamic Prophet Muhammad's tradition and practices that serve as a model for Muslims to follow. The Sunnah is what all Muslims during Muhammad's times clearly saw, followed, and passed on to future generations. According to classical Islamic theories, Hadith and the Quran are the divine revelation, or we call it as Wahyu, delivered through Muhammad that comprise the primary sources of Islamic law and belief or theology. Shia Muslim who believe that the 12 Imam interpret the Sunnah, and Sufi Muslim who believe that Muhammad transmit the values of the Sunnah through a series of Sufi teachers, differ from Sunni classical Islamic theories. Other than that, according to Muslim belief, Muhammad was the best model for Muslims, and several verses in the Quran declare his behavior to be exemplary and command his followers to obey him. Other than that, Sunnah serve as a foundation not only for major laws and rituals in Islam, such as how to pray salat, but also for even the most mundane activities such as how to cut fingernails or the proper length of a bird. Sunnah was used in the pre-Islamic period to mean manner of acting, whether good or bad. During the early Islamic period, the term referred to any good precedent established by people in the past, including Muhammad and his companions. Furthermore, Muhammad's Sunnah was not always associated with Hadith. Based on Hadith reports, the term Al-Sunnah came to be regarded as synonymous with Muhammad's Sunnah. Recording the Sunnah was also an Arabian tradition, and when Arabians converted to Islam, they brought this custom with them. According to Hadith, Muhammad's Sunnah include his specific word, Sunnah Qawliyah, habit, practices, Sunnah Fi'liyah, and silent approval, Sunnah Takririyah. In Islam, the term Sunnah can also refer to optional religious duties such as Sunnah Salat. Okay, so now we will discuss about the proof or hujjah of Sunnah. So the tens of verses in the Quran deal explicitly or implicitly with this issue in terms of defining the role of the Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, commanding Muslims to obey him Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, prohibiting them from disobeying him Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So here are some of those verses with no comment provided for brevity, and because most of these verses have already been discussed. So Allah says in the following verses, "And whoever obeys Allah and His Messenger will be admitted by Him to gardens, which is in paradise, under which rivers flow, abiding eternally therein, and that is the great entertainment. And whoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses His limits, He will put him into the fire to abide eternally therein, and he will have a humiliating punishment." Secondly, the Quran emphasizes in another passage, "Whoever obeys the Messenger verily obeys God." Finally, the Quran is unequivocal in stating that the definitive ruling of the Quran and Sunnah are binding on believers in the sense that they are no longer free to deviate from the dictates of divine will or to pursue a cause of their own choosing. Whenever God and His Messenger have decided a matter, it is not for a faithful man or woman to pursue another cause of his or own choosing. According to these and other similar passages in the Quran, the Sunnah is a proof second only to the Quran in all Shari'i matters, and conformity to the terms of prophetic legislation is a Quranic obligation on all Muslims. The last proven was the companions have reached an agreement on this point, both during the Prophet's lifetime and after his death. They regularly obey the Prophet's instruction and follow his example, regardless of whether his comments or prohibition originate in the Quran or not. The first two Caliph Abu Bakr and Umar followed the Prophet's Sunnah whenever they could. In cases where they were unsure, they would inquire whether other companions had any knowledge of the Prophetic Sunnah in relation to specific issues. Caliph Umar is also known to have issued written instruction to his judges, instructing them to follow the Prophet's Sunnah whenever they could not find the necessary guidance in the Quran. And the last one, I will explain about the rules of Sunnah. So the first rules is the Sunnah tell us how to implement Al-Quran. We would not know how to apply the Quran to our life if we only had the Quran. Allah has taught us how to properly understand and apply the Quran through His Messenger. In terms of faith, the Quran is brief and lacks specificity. The Prophet's rule was to explain in detail how we should worship Allah. For example, Allah commanded Muslims to pray, but He did not specify how many times per day we should pray in the Quran. Furthermore, Allah did not specify how many rak'at we should perform in each prayer. The Quran commanded us to pay zakah, fast, and perform permanent Hajj. However, Allah did not specify how to carry out all of Islam pillars. Rasulullah SAW was assigned to this role. He explained and demonstrated to the early Muslim all aspects of worship and Islamic etiquette. In Al-Quran, Allah commands us to exhibit noble qualities such as honesty, truthfulness, kindness, mercy, and courage, among many others. He sent Rasulullah SAW to show us how to achieve in a high level of character in our daily life through His actions. Number 2 is the Sunnah clarifies the Quran. There are numerous phrases and concepts in the Quran that require clarification. Although the early Muslims understood much of the Quran, they could not comprehend in all without the assistance of Rasulullah SAW. Rasulullah SAW was just the teacher who explained Al-Hajj or the message to his disciples. And I have sent down the Quran to you so that you may explain to the people what has been sent to them, said Allah. And the last one, the Sunnah is the second sources of religious knowledge of the Al-Quran. As I stated in point 1 and 2, the Sunnah teach Muslim additional information about Islam that is not found in the Quran. However, all Islamic scholars agree that Al-Quran is the primary sources of knowledge for us, with Sunnah coming in second. In fact, learning the Quran without also learning the Sunnah may lead to misunderstanding Allah's instruction in Al-Quran. Allah sent Prophet Muhammad to teach us how to put the Quran into practice. The Sunnah contains many details of Islamic teachings that are not found in the Quran. As a result, the Sunnah is Islamic second sources of religious knowledge.
Assalamualaikum. My name is AQILAH binti GHAZALI. So, I will present about classification and value of Sunnah. The pertaining to subject matter is the verbal Sunnah consists of the Prophet's statement on any topic, including the hadith fi al-sa'imah zakah, which states that cattle is subject to zakat. The Prophet's actual Sunnah comprise his deeds and actual instructions, such as the manner in which he observed salah, faced or engaged in Hajj rites, or the transaction he entered into, such as sales and loan money. Similarly, the Prophet's approval of cutting off the thief's hands and at the wrist provided concrete example of how the Quranic verse Al-Ma'idah could be applied. This sentence merely states that the hand should be served without indicating precisely where the companions did and words that the Prophet was aware of and approved of make up the Sunnah that has been given tacit approval. The Prophet's quiet and absence of condemnation, as well as his outright approbation and vocal confirmation, can be used to infer his tacit approval. The hadith are now divided into two groups, which is continuous and discontinuous. Discontinuous, or we call mutasil, and discontinued based on the continuity and completeness of their chains of transmitters, or we call gair mutasil. A hadith that has an uninterrupted line of transmission from the most recent narrator all the way back to the Prophet is said to be continuous. The continuous hadith has been split into the two primary categories of mutawatir and ahad by the majority of ulama. The well-known or mashhur is an intermediary category that the Hanafis have introduced. Mutawatir literally translates to continuously recurring. Here, it's referred to a statement made by an unspecified number of persons who are linked in a way that eliminates the prospect of their consenting to spread a falsehood due to their size and dependability. A report only qualifies as mutawatir if it meets the requirements listed below. First, there has to be a sufficient number of reporters in each era or generation to rule out the potential of fabrication. The reporters must secondly base their reporting on their sense perception. Thirdly, the report must be supported by factual information rather than conjecture. Fourth, the reporters must be morally respectable people. Lastly, journalists should be objective. The mashhur is a hadith that was initially related by one, two, or more of the Prophet's companions but has since gained notoriety and been passed down orally by an uncountable number of individuals. It is essential that the report's dissemination took place in the first or second generation after the Prophet's passing. The primary distinction between the mutawatir and mashhur is that each link in the chain of transmitter for the former consists of many reporters, which the initial link in the latter consists of just one or two companions. The ahad, also known as Khabar al-Wahid, is a hadith that is narrated from the Prophet by only one person or by a strange assortment of people. It is referred to as Khabar al-Qasah by Imam Shafi'i since it does not satisfy the demands of the mutawatir or the mashhur. It is a hadith that on its own cannot convey knowledge unless it is backed up by further evidence. However, the majority of legal experts concur that ahad may create a rule of law given that it is told by a trustworthy narrator and the report's content are not inimical to logic. Only ahad that satisfies the following conditions may serve as the foundation for obligation. First off, the transmitter is a capable individual. Consequently, the carrier of ahad must be a Muslim and a righteous person. Additionally, the narrator of ahad must have a retentive memory and must not be connected to any kind of fabrication. Finally, the hadith must have been heard directly from the source by the broadcaster of the ahad. The discontinued hadith is the transmission lineage of this hadith does not go all the way back to the Prophet. A hadith that has been explicitly attributed to the Prophet by a successor without specifying the final connection, meaning the companion who may have recounted it from the Prophet, is referred to as a mursal. The majority of ulama do not believe the hadith of mursal because of the missing connection and other uncertainties. However, certain ulama such as Hasan al-Basri and Qatadah allow it if the following requirements are met. It is corroborated by a different trustworthy hadith. It is consistent with the examples of the companions, and the broadcaster is known for avoiding reporting weak hadith. There are three different types of it, which is mursal, mu'dal, and munkati. Mursal, also known as rush, occurs when there is no connection between the successors and the prophets. Hadith that has been discontinued, often referred to as mursal, has an imperfect and broken transmission chain. Next, the mu'dal is a hadith whose chain of narrators is linking two successive links. Last but not least, the hadith known as munkati contains a single missing link in the middle of its chain of narrators.
Assalamualaikum, my name is AIDA ZULAIKHA binti OSMAN. So we continue to pertaining to reliability. When the Sunnah explain or clarify the Quran, whether by highlighting the Quran ambivalence, limiting its absolute assertions, or outlining its broader terminology, it is trustworthy. For example, from the Sahih, Hasan, Da'if, and Mawdu'. The first one, Sahih. Sahih means authentic, and it is passed down through an unbroken chain of narrator, all of whom have strong personalities and memories. It is characterized as a hadith that has an uninterrupted lines of transmission dating all the way back to the Prophet, was narrated by upright people with strong recollections, and is free of both obvious and subtle errors. The next one, Hasan. Hasan's meanings goods refer to hadiths whose authenticity is not as well established as that of hadith, but is sufficient for use as supporting evidence. The hadith Hasan, there are the good traditions which no sources and unambiguous reporters, though they are inferior in terms of authenticity to the hadith Hasan. Some scholars define hadith Hasan as a hadith that meets the condition of hadith Sahih, but the narrator have less memorization ability. Hasan communicates through an unbroken chains of narrator, all of whom have strong personalities but poor memory. This hadith should not contradict a more reliable report and should not contain any other hidden flaws. The third one, Da'if. Da'if is the designation of a hadith as weak. The causes of a hadith being classified as weak is described as either due to discontinuity in the chains of narrator or due to some criticism of a narrator. This discontinuity refers to the omissions of a narrator at various points throughout the isnad, and is referred to using specific terminology. Da'if is not Hasan because it lacks one or more of the element of a Hasan hadith. For example, if the narrator lacks sound memory and sound character, if the narrative contains a hidden flaw, or if the chain of narrator is broken. Last but not least, a Mawdu'. Mawdu' hadith is one that have been proven to be fabricated and cannot be traced back to its sources. According to Al-Dahabi, a Mawdu' hadith is one which the text contradicts established norm of the Prophet's sayings, or in which the reported include a liar. The confession of their creators revealed that some of these hadiths were false. External evidence relate to a discrepancy in the dates or time of a specific incident, also recognize Mawdu' narrations.
So we move to the abrogation of Al-Quran and the Sunnah. The concept of abrogation is one of the most controversial issues in the study of the Quran, which is naskah. This idea has been used by Islamic critics to argue that the Quran is not of divine origin because it is inconsistent. But the truth is, the abrogation of the Quran will provide applicable laws in all circumstances and reveal the wisdom of the Creator who designed Islam to be applicable to all times, places, and people. Even though all scriptures are the same in spirit, some specific laws of the early revelation found in Taurat, Psalms, and the Gospel have been superseded by Islamic rules. Christians celebrate on holiday on Sundays, while Muslims perform Jumaat prayer on Fridays. Jews celebrate the Sabbath on Saturday. We believe that Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala has led us to prefer Fridays to other days from our weekly sermons. As Qatada said, He has only one faith, but different rules. He also said there are laws in the Taurat, the Gospel, and the Quran to test who obeys to Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala and who does not. Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala allows them what they want and forbids what they will. Instead, the messenger monotheism and devotion to Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala is only accepted by religions. Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala could have commanded Muslims to impose a single code on all, but He chose to urge us to against good, to compete with one another in good deeds, such as rise and fall. We can interpret the entire Quran using a logical and consistent approach. Apparent contradiction between clauses are not real contradiction. This apparent contradiction can be resolved if we look deeper than superficially. Invalidation is just one of several interpretive reconciliation techniques. The technical definition later academics gave to the terms abrogation and how those definitions varied from the way early Muslims used the word linguistically are what caused confusion for lay people. From the above, it may seem that abolition is an obligation, a thorny issue that one can only regret by ignoring. So we move to the condition of abrogated and abrogation text. In the first case, both the verse and its decision are invalidated. In other words, the text is no longer part of the Quran, so its provisions are no longer legal and intended to be followed. A narration of Hazrat Aisyah radhiyallahu anha, who supposedly said that a previously abolished chapter of the Quran indicated that 5 or 10 consecutive breastfeeding acts would make marriage illegal. It shown a working example of this. It was narrated that Aisyah radhiyallahu anha said one of the things that Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala revealed in the Quran and then abrogated was that nothing made marriage prohibited except 10 breastfeeding or 5 well-known breastfeeding. Sunnah Majalah, the book of marriage, chapter 1 or 2 breastfeeding are not illegal. Next, the second category, adult, this verse has been cancelled and is no longer part of the Holy Quran. Its rulings are still relevant and must be followed. Here is supposedly cancelled biblical example of ordering the stoning of 2 of the elders who committed adultery. Ubay bin Khabab said to me, "How do you read Surah Al-Ahzab? How many verses do you find in it?" I replied, 73 verses. He said, "Only there was a time when it was equal in length to Surah Al-Baqarah and we would read within it. The old man and old woman, when they commit adultery, stone them without any ambiguity as an exemplary punishment from Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala. And Allah Subhanahu Wa Taala is powerful wise." And the third verse of the Holy Quran contains a rule that another verse contradicts. Although this passage still exists in the Holy Quran, it should not be applied as it is rendered meaningless and ineffective by another verse. A troubling example is the passage which is there is no cautions as to belief, which is said to be overruled by the following passage in favor of jihad. A large group from amongst the scholars have related this verse to the Ahlul Kitab, which is Jews and Christians, and whosoever enter into their religion before the abrogation and changing of this verse, while they will pay jizya. And others have stated that it has been abrogated by the verse about the fighting, and it is necessary to call all people to enter into the true religion of Islam. And if anyone from amongst them refuse to accept Islam and does not approach it with acceptance and refuse to pay the jizya, he will be forced again until killed. And this is the meaning of cautions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has stated, "There shall be summoned to fight against a people who given to vehement war, then shall ye fight, or they shall submit."
Last but not least, jurist opinions. There is some disagreement among jurists as to whether the Sunnah or this last variety of it at any rate constitutes an independent sources of Sharia. Some ulama of the later age, al-Mutaakhirun, including al-Shatibi and al-Shawkani, have had the view that the Sunnah is an independent sources. They have future maintained that the Quranic ayah in Surah An-Nur is inconclusive, that despite it's been clear on the point that the Prophet interprets the Quran, it does not overrule the recognitions of the Sunnah as independent sources. On the contrary, it is argued that there is evidence in the Quran which substantiates the independent status of Sunnah. The Hadith is clear on the point that the Sunnah is authoritative in cases in which no guidance can be found in the Quran. The Sunnah, in other words, stands on its own feet regardless of whether it is substantiated by the Quran or not. Majority argue that even when the Sunnah broaches new ground, it is with the purpose of giving effect to one or the others of the objective that have been validated in the Quran. Thus, it is concluded that the Sunnah is not separate from the Quran. So that's all from me. Thank you.